Hi, my name is Stu Roche. I'm a sport performance intern here at Eastern Michigan for the winter semester of 2015. I'm the coach Ron McKeefrey. Today I'm actually going to present to you on something I have no experience in. All right, that is exercise in zero gravity. And I wanted to kind of look into this because one, I have no experience in it, and two, it's pretty cool. And if I had the opportunity to go into space, I absolutely would. So that's my reason behind it. So first of all, actually, you were going to start with a bit of trivia. Okay, so for a bag of space food, what do we got? Freeze-dried bananas. Okay, if you can tell me what are the 4 nations that are on board the ISS, the International Space Stations? First one?
The U.S. The U.S.
U.S. 3 more.
You still want me going? Or?
Sorry?
You still want me to answer them all? Or Russia?
Yes. 2 more. Give these guys a head start.
Japan?
Yeah, 1 more.
Ooh.
It's a neighbor.
China?
No.
Oh, what are you doing? That's a neighbor?
It's Canada.
Yeah.
Oh, neighbor.
Sweet, right.
I said Japan, he said neighbor.
Okay, one more. What speed is the ISS traveling at around the world to the nearest 1,000 miles an hour?
15,000.
Okay, other guesses? So you get close. This is for strawberries, by the way.
19.
Okay, 19. Any advances, lower, higher? We've got 50,000, 19. You guys can all guess.
I'd say 6,000.
6,000. Coach Matt?
200.
200.
Say 25.
25.
30.
30. Okay, Paul wins. It's 17,000 miles an hour around the world. So there's roughly 15 sunrises. Roughly 15 sunrises and 15 sunsets in our kind of 24-hour day for the guys up on the space station. Wow. All right, okay, so next slide, please. All right, so immediately we're just going to go off topic on this one, okay? So sleep. As strength coaches, we all get pretty minimal sleep, all right? So Paul, how much sleep did you get last night?
7 hours.
7 hours, that's decent. Tracy?
About 6.
6 hours, okay. So Tracy, you look like the kind of guy who likes to sleep in their spare time. Yeah, your spare time. All right, so what if I told you that tomorrow you can stay in bed the whole day, okay? You don't have to go to class, you don't have exams, you don't have essays, and I'm going to bring you all the food you want, okay? And all you have to do is just stay in bed the whole day. Sound good?
Yeah, sure, I guess.
That
Right. Sounds a little weird to me. Yeah, I wouldn't stay in bed all day, but...
What about if I said I'm going to pay you $18,000 to do that as well?
Sure.
A bit more attractive? Okay, cool. All right, so let's do this right here. Okay, so Tracy, come up. Right? I'm going to grab that chair as well with you. And just put it right here. Okay, so Tracy, you be in bed right here, so you put your feet up on the end chair, you can lie back right here. That's really nice. Got a dog for you as well. You go, buddy. Cool. All right, so Tracy's in bed, but he's got a couple of conditions here, all right? One, next slide. That's the money slide, next slide, yeah. One, instead of actually being in bed for 1 day, I tricked you. You're going to be in bed for 2 months, all right? You can't move. You can't get out of bed. You can't walk to go to the bathroom. You have to do it in the bed outside. I'm going to hook you up to medical equipment. Okay, I'm going to do some tests on you, put you through an MRI a couple of times. I'm going to completely control your diet, and I'm also going to do some physiological testing on you, telling you when to exercise or not. All right? But it's still, it's $250 a day, man. It's pretty good, right? Just staying in bed. Next slide, please. So, you know, this is actually a kind of experiment that's going on right now in NASA JSR down in Houston. All right? And the question is, like, why are they doing this? Next slide, please. You know, why are they doing this? And again. So the idea is they're trying to mimic a situation which is similar to a zero gravity or reduced gravity environment. So by unloading Tracy, next slide, please. By unloading Tracy and reducing the effects of gravity on his body for a long period of time, you know, it could be studies from 2 weeks, a short period of time, up to 3 months. Okay, and this genuinely happens. People in bed for 3 months don't get up ever. Okay, we're trying to mimic that kind of environment up on the space station. So we have an unloading. There's no mechanical stress in the body. Our body responds really well to stimuli. Okay, we know that as strength coaches. If we want to make somebody stronger, we increase the weight, we push them harder, we may increase the volume, and our body responds to that stimuli. It's exactly the same the other way around. Okay, detraining for us, we know that term. Right? But this is called kind of disuse atrophy if he's not loaded by gravity. So we have this kind of increase muscle protein breakdown and a decrease in muscle protein synthesis. So you enter this kind of catabolic state and you're losing muscle pretty rapidly. Okay? Next slide, please. But the question is, why do we need to be strong in space? All right? Why do we need to be strong? There's zero gravity there, so if you think about it, everything is made up of mass. Gravity, the acceleration due to gravity, makes weight, okay? And so we are pulled down towards the Earth, as are the weight plates that we lift, the barbells that we lift. In space, reduced gravity, pretty much zero gravity on the ISS. So why do we really need to be strong? Well, the first reason is something called inertia. So even though everything has mass, okay, we still have to overcome what's called inertia. So if an astronaut was blocked up against a wall, and it was being a slow asteroid was coming, let's say this is 100,000 kgs, this asteroid, very slowly coming at him, he can't move, okay, he's just got to push this thing aside. He could probably push it aside, but he's going to get crushed because the inertia is too large to overcome. Whereas if it's a 100 kg weight, no asteroid, it's probably pretty easy then. So everything still has inertia regardless of the gravitational force up top. Next one. Considering what's called EVA, or extravehicular activity, so a spacewalk. So let's say Tracy's up here. Let's say Tracy's now on the space station, right? Tracy's on the space station. He's got a suit on. This is a pretty hostile environment out in outer space. So that suit's got to be pressurized to maintain a good internal environment for the human being. So that's one. It's pretty stiff, and two, the pressure makes it even stiffer. So they've got to make sure that their astronauts are ready to deal with that kind of stress when they're either building or repairing or adding on to the ISS or anything else. Next slide, please. Good. Another consideration is planetary exploration. We all know about the missions to Mars, okay, and the kind of recruitment drive that's going on right now. It's a crazy recruitment drive of people signing up to leave Earth forever, okay, and go to Mars. So it takes roughly 500 days, they're estimating, 500 days to get to the red planet, all right? And in that time, they're consistently in a zero G or reduced gravity kind of environment. So that's going to have profound effects on the body, muscle, bones, ligaments, tendon, in our kind of realm, and many, many other things in terms of physiology too. Next slide. And also we've got to consider when they return to Earth. So the kind of average stay on the ISS is roughly 6 months. There are 2 astronauts up there right now that are going to be there for a year, which is the longest anyone's been there for one single period of time. When they come back to Earth, having lost this muscle tissue that we'll look at later, and their bone mineral density has decreased, we need to make sure that they're not at an increased risk of injury when they come back down from those kind of small microfractures. Okay, so Tracy's in a pretty bad spot right now. If he's been up there for 6 months, coming back down, this is actually what happens. They land in the capsule, and they get carried out, and they get carried all the way into a vehicle, and then they get transported from there. Because they don't want to risk fractures, okay, and there's some pretty interesting things that happen. For example, on the feet, because you're up in space, and you're never really kind of in contact with the ground per se, with that gravitational pull, you lose the calluses on your heels and your toes, and it's pretty painful to walk when you get back to Earth. Okay, so we need to make sure that our astronauts are in safe hands. All right, next slide. Good, all right, so really how profound can this atrophy be, and how profound can this bone mineral density loss be? So let's talk about that for a bit right now. Okay, so the first one, let's talk about the bone. Next slide, please. So we have something called resorption, all right? So everyone's kind of familiar with the old lady or the osteoporotic person, okay, walking around town. They're old, they're hunched over, their bone mineral density is decreased. It's an aging process, a pretty natural process, but it can be exacerbated in a kind of disease sense when it comes to nutritional status and what have you. So you see, this may be a healthy individual down on Earth in a 1G environment, and this is an astronaut coming back from a 0G or a reduced G kind of environment. Because the loading isn't there, the bones are very responsive to that mechanical stress and compression, and that's how they build their axes. If they don't have that, it's a very kind of energetically costly tissue to maintain. So if you don't have the need to stand and work against gravity, then the body is kind of like, what's the point? I can use that energy elsewhere. All right, next slide. Cool, my favorite bit. All right, this is where most of my kind of realm is. Muscle physiology is where I've been working the last 3 years. There's something called a Bergstrom biopsy. Has anybody here had a biopsy before? A muscle biopsy? Okay. Tracy, you have one?
No.
Cool, all right, lucky day. Lucky day, here we go. All right. Don't worry, I'm not actually going to biopsy you, but I'm going to show you how this works. Okay. This is something we do pretty regularly over at the University of Michigan in the orthopedic surgery lab. We're doing a couple of studies on ACL tear and repair and looking at quadriceps atrophy, so a similar kind of mechanism of that atrophy. So this is called a Bergstrom needle right here. Okay, this is the fellow that's going to go into your leg, okay, and pull out a little bit of mincemeat. Right, it's just about the size of a razor head on a mechanical pencil. All right, so it's just got an opening in it right here, and a shaft that comes through the middle and pinches down. All right, and all that this is a suction pump that you would attach to the Bergstrom needle at the side here. You'd apply suction. Okay, would go into the leg. We'd obviously have some lidocaine in there, so you can't actually feel it at all. There's no pain receptors in the deep tissue, just at the skin. Go into the leg, apply suction. The muscle gets pulled in. We just snip it and pull it out. So it's pretty painless. It's uncomfortable. It's a kind of deep pressure, but it's pretty painless. So that's what we do. So let's say we've just biopsied Space Cadet Tracy's leg here. Let's say we're going to do his gastroc and soleus area, and let's see what's going on. So next slide, please. Okay, so the atrophy, let's see how profound this is. 0 up here represents pre-flight, all right? So they're on the ground, 1G condition. You know, they've been training pretty well. They're at 0 here, time point. You've got gastrocnemius in the white boxes, soleus in the black boxes, and this is when they come back, okay, 4 days after their return to Earth. All right, you've got roughly an 11% change in volume, okay, from pre-flight in the gastroc, and an even more profound change in the soleus. Okay, so this is pretty substantial, and as you can see, 19 days after return to Earth, they've got a bit of stimuli there, mechanical stimuli from the gravity, and probably a little bit of training too, and obviously they're returning more towards that pre-flight kind of level. Go next slide, please. Another thing is fiber type switching. So we tend to move, I'll go through this quite quickly, we tend to move from type 1 fibers, or type 1 hybrids, i.e. slow fibers, to a more fast fiber type, okay, which is kind of a little bit counterintuitive. You think, you know, if I'm training for speed, I'm training for power, I'm probably going to increase my fast fiber type. But this is actually kind of the same as an injury model, or a disease model. For some reason, the body wants to go from a slow to more towards a fast or a fast hybrid kind of phenotype. So these are all the different phenotypes down here of the myosin heavy chain isoform. So we move from slow to fast. So that's what's going on in return from space. Next slide, please. Okay, another thing is the performance of the muscle. So that's really important. All right, yeah, sure, histology and the composition of the muscle is really important, but what about the performance too? You know, what's actually happening? Are we getting weaker? Are we getting less powerful? Or is the muscle pretty much staying the same, but maybe we're losing some muscle tissue? All right, so as you can see, pre-space flight is the dark line, post-space flight is the dotted line. We're losing some torque right here, okay? Pretty substantial losses, and this is at the control velocity per second. So this would be on a device that controls, let's say you're kicking in and out. This is actually using the calf muscle, so it'd be kind of like a leg press type of thing, but it's controlling the speed at which you can move and measuring the torque that you produce. So obviously, performance-wise, we're having decrements too. All right, next slide. This is a video, so you have to use a mouse pad to click on it. So this is actually a single fiber experiment. This is from the lab that I work in, and this is pretty much what I do on a daily basis. Just click it a couple of times. So here we've got this is a single muscle fiber. This is a single cell that we extract. We permeabilize, meaning we punch holes in the membrane, and then we activate it with a really high volume of calcium. All right, so your muscle physiology right there is the calcium binding and releasing the ATP releases the crossheads, and then we can have our muscle contraction. So this is what we look at in our lab, and it's what a lot of researchers who are looking at spaceflight also use. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah, so the question is, you know, who's responsible for these astronauts, you know, in their training programs before flight, during, and afterwards? So this guy on the left here, or your right, Mark Williams, is at NASA JSC, and he's responsible for what's called the Astronaut Strength Conditioning and Rehabilitation Group. All right, so it's comprised of 5 people, including him, and they look after all of the NASA astronauts and program for them. Next slide, please. Good, so let's talk about pre-flight. So the astronauts are with those coaches, if you will, about 2 years prior to their trip to the ISS or the mission or whatever. Okay? And they're looking at a variety of different exercise modalities, including resistance exercise and kind of more traditional cardiovascular style exercises on the bikes, on the treadmills, that kind of thing. All right? It's progressive and individualized, and we're looking at whole body movements because they're trying to build a little bit of muscle mass before they go up in space, because they know it's pretty conceivable that they're going to lose muscle mass while they're up there, so why not get a head start? And they're also looking at other things, including bone density, and like I mentioned before, cardiovascular fitness. An important thing that yes? Bones. An important thing that I read up on is that in those spacesuits, the grip often fatigues because it's very hard to grip things, and they have to do that with drills and stuff. So they do quite a lot of grip endurance work, which is quite interesting. Next slide. Good. In flight then. Here we go. Next slide. Here's what they have up on the ISS. They have a treadmill known as T2. You can see these bungees are actually pulling them down to the treadmill, although otherwise they'd simply float away. And they can obviously change the speed, and they can change quite a few other things on here. The incline is something obviously they can't change because they're in 0G, so it wouldn't matter. That's T2, that's what they use for cardiovascular fitness. And another thing for cardiovascular fitness is CVIS, okay, cycle ergometer with vibration isolation system. So as they're exercising, they don't want the whole ISS flapping about with their vibrations, all right, so they have these isolation systems in place. Notice it doesn't have a seat or any handles, okay? Next. But something that we're kind of more interested in is that resistance exercise, you know, that strength, muscle mass conservation, that kind of thing. So what they have, and this is the kind of 2.0 model, they had one before this, and this is called ARED, Advanced Resistant Exercise Device. So it looks a little bit more like a bench press, squat rack style setup. Let's go to the next slide. We've got a video here, so let's play this one. This is Colonel Mark Hopkins, who's currently at the ISS. He's going to describe to you how this ARED system works.
This is astronaut Mike Hopkins from the Countermeasures Training Room at NASA JSC. And today I'm going to talk to you about the crown jewel of our countermeasures devices up on orbit, and that's the ARED, which is the Advanced Resistive Exercise Device. And this is ARED, and this is what we use to help counteract the effects of losing muscle mass and also bone loss, one of our primary tools. And so actually it looks a little bit different than your squat rack that you might have in your local gym. But it has some of the same functions in the sense that we do squats on this, we can do deadlifts, bench press, shoulder press, things of that nature. And it's very effective for us, and it's really been very helpful for increasing our fitness when we actually return back to Earth. So how does it work? Well, we actually have two canisters here that have vacuum in them, and so we pull against that vacuum. We can just dial in different loads with the handle right here, and we can change how much weight we're lifting. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of a demo here with the squat. And so some of the first things we have to do is make sure this bar is at the right height for each individual. And so in this case, I'm going to need to rotate the handles. And so each one can be rotated individually. And then after that, there's numbers along the side here. And so for each of our lifts, this is some of the stuff we do here on the ground, is we figure out what the right setting is for each of us. And so I now have it set up, and this is the plate that we have up in orbit. This black platform that you see me standing on isn't actually there on orbit. So then I would dial in the right load. I can step in. And now we do a squat.
All right, we can move on now.
We rack it.
Good stuff. All right, so in flight, the astronauts are scheduled for roughly 2.5 hours a day, a day being a 24-hour period, because obviously they have about 15 days in the span and we have one. So 2.5 hours per day prescribed for exercise, and really they get pretty much free rein as to what they want to do. They have their coaches down on the ground which can give them suggestions, but from what I read and looking at the studies, there's a vast variation in what people do. So they just tend to ask them to exercise for a period of time during the day, and they can choose what they want to do. There are programs on the bike, on CVIS, and on T2, the treadmill, that they can log into, and the data is then downloaded straight to Earth. As you can see, they have their own logbooks, and the data is stored on the cloud. So next slide, please. Good. When they return to Earth, the slide that we saw with the guy being carried, the astronaut, when they return down, there's a very intensive period of physiological assessment. So again, we're looking at those things, the muscle, the bone density, the tendon morphology, looking at other things as well, including optometry. One thing they've noticed with extended flight is your eyeballs actually change shape. So they're looking into things like that right now. And vestibular function as well. There's some pretty funny videos on YouTube of astronauts, landing on the moon, if they did, whatever you believe in, and just falling over because their vestibular function, their inner ear function is completely messed up. As soon as they get back to a kind of an environment that has some gravity, they just can't cope with it. So they have to do very basic tasks in the first couple of weeks where they're just looking at simple movements, unloading movements, and stuff that we would take for granted, like walking around, like getting up from a chair, like weaving through a cone maze. Okay, just very simple things. They have to kind of relearn those things, and they have to make sure their muscles are firing in the right patterns. So next slide. Good. So future directions. Just two last slides right here. One cool thing I saw was an antagonist, agonist kind of stimulus, whereby you have a stimulus to, let's say, the antagonist, let's say the triceps. Okay, so that's firing. It's firing almost for you, and then you're trying to do a bicep curl against it. Probably not the most comfortable thing in the world, but something that astronauts might want to use. Next slide. And this has been around for a little while now. Katsu training, blood flow restriction training, occlusion training. All right, you have these kind of cuffs that are pneumatic, and the idea is that the blood is able to enter during the exercise, but during the rest period, it's not able to leave. So you get this kind of pooling of metabolites, and that's one of the suggestions as to how it might work. And you see this increased muscle mass, increased protein synthesis with pretty low kind of lows, like 30% of your warm max, as opposed to your typical 70%, 75, 80%. All right, one more slide. Good, thank you very much.